Russia fires a missile at the US August 18, 2025. What Russia thought was a Ukrainian jet was actually an American F-35 Lightning silently gliding through international airspace. Within seconds, a nearly 4,000-pound missile blasted off a launch pad in Russia's Kaliningrad at Mach 14, detonating so close that the shockwave ripped off the stealth jet's wings and forced the pilot to make an emergency landing in the sea. His last words were heard over secure communications channels. Mayday, hit target over the Baltic Sea. That one transmission set off a chain reaction. In Washington, leaders saw it not as an accident, but as an act of war. Hours later, the USS Gerald R. Ford received the order to attack and unleashed a firestorm. 68 suicide drones, 25 fighter jets, and 20 Tomahawk missiles. A hail of steel aimed at Russia's most fortified fortress. What followed was a fierce firefight that shocked the world. Was this really a Russian mistake, or just an excuse to justify its true intentions? Could this American counterattack overcome Russia's impregnable defense system? Come with me to the heart of this war. August 18, 2025. At exactly 9:42 a.m., the sky above the Baltic Sea, usually a tense but silent corridor of patrol flights, erupted into chaos. An American F-35 Lightning II, launched only hours earlier from RAF Lake and Heath in the United Kingdom, was slicing through the cold air at 32,000 feet on a routine reconnaissance mission. Its stealth profile was designed to keep it invisible. But that morning, stealth was not enough. 70 miles northwest of Kaliningrad, a heavily armed Russian exclave bristling with missile batteries, the silence broke. Deep inside fortified bunkers, the massive S-400 Triumph radar system lit up, its powerful arrays locking onto a single dot. In the tense command post, Russian officers whispered to one another, convinced this was a hostile Ukrainian jet daring to cross into the wrong airspace. The order came swiftly. Fire. A 48N6DM surface-to-air missile over 22 feet long and weighing nearly 4,000 pounds roared off its launcher. Within seconds, it accelerated to 1 Mach 14, over 10,000 miles per hour, leaving a white scar across the sky as it hunted the F-35. Inside the cockpit, the 34-year-old American pilot sensors screamed warnings, pulled the stick hard, deploying decoy flares, diving into violent, evasive maneuvers that pinned him against his seat with crushing G-forces. For almost 27 terrifying seconds, death chased him through the thin Baltic air. The missile never struck directly. But when it finally self-destructed just 600 yards off the F-35's wing, the shockwave ripped through the sky like a thunderclap. Shards of shrapnel tore into the stealth jet's right wing, crippling its flight surfaces. Warning lights flared red across the pilot's console. The aircraft was no longer combat capable. Breathing hard, sweat running into his eyes, the pilot steadied his trembling hands. He keyed his secure radio, voice low but steady. Mayday, Mayday, Falcon 1 hit over Baltic waters. Aircraft damaged. Tempting controlled ditch. The jet's nose dipped toward the gray sea below. For a fleeting moment, the pilot caught the glint of his wing, scarred, half-shredded, and he knew escape was impossible. At 9:47 a.m., the F-35 banked hard and began its desperate descent toward the water. Beneath the surface calm of the Baltic, the stage had been set. What Moscow thought was a warning shot had just crossed a line. And in Washington, the message blinking on encrypted screens would soon be read as nothing less than an act of war. If you were the top leader of the United States, would you order an attack now? Or would you wait for Russia to explain? Let me take a look at the Pentagon's decision. At 4:15 a.m., Washington time, the emergency signal from the downed F-35 reached the Pentagon. A single encrypted transmission bouncing across satellites carried the chilling words, "Aircraft hit, pilot ejecting, immediate recovery needed." Within minutes, the secure conference room inside the White House, known as the Situation Room, was filled with America's most powerful decision-makers. The President, the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and the National Security Advisor sat grim-faced as the details appeared on the screen. The Baltic Sea, one of the most contested corridors in the world, had just claimed a $98 million fighter jet. Worse still, intelligence officers confirmed what no one wanted to hear. The missile had been launched from Kaliningrad, home to one of Russia's densest networks of radar and anti-air batteries. The odds of it being a mistake were slim. The implication was staggering. Russia had effectively fired on the United States. At 4:27 a.m., the president gave a single order: prepare the fleet. Across the Atlantic, the USS Gerald R. Ford, America's most advanced aircraft carrier, was already on station with its strike group. 1 carrier, 2 guided missile cruisers, 3 destroyers, and over 75 aircraft. At the admiral's command, operations officers began calculating flight paths, strike packages, and satellite support. The plan was brutal in its clarity, back at the very heart of Kaliningrad's impenetrable defenses. 68 suicide drones equipped with radar jamming pods and guided bombs would go first. Behind them, a wall of steel, 15 F-22 Raptors, and 10 F-15X Eagles, all loaded with precision ordnance. For a moment, silence filled the situation room. Everyone knew what was about to happen. A single missile strike had dragged the world's 2 largest nuclear powers to the edge. And America was about to answer, not with words, but with fire. Before we get into the heart of this war, support us by liking, subscribing, and letting us know where in the world you're watching from. 3:30 p.m., local Baltic time. The gray skies above the Baltic trembled as the first wave of America's retaliation roared into motion. From the decks of the USS Gerald R. Ford, more than 68 unmanned suicide drones lifted into the air, their wings glinting against the fading sun. Each carried a payload of 200 pounds of precision explosives and pods designed to jam Russian radar. They spread out across the sky in wide arcs, forming a swarm that stretched for miles. Behind them came the steel spearhead. 15 F-22 Raptors and 10 F-15EX Eagle to south climbing to strike altitude, flying in tight V formations. Their engines thundered across the Baltic, their holds bristling with JDM smart bombs and AM-120 rams. On the carrier deck below, sailors watched silently, knowing that in the next half hour, the world might tilt into open war. Inside Kaliningrad's bunkers, alarms screamed. The Russian operators, overwhelmed by a sudden cascade of false signals, saw their radar screens bloom with hundreds of ghost contacts. The American drones were flooding the airwaves, blinding the defenders. Yet not all systems went dark. Secondary radars from Pantsir S-1 and BUM-3 batteries began tracking, and within moments, the sky above Kaliningrad lit up. The Russians fired first. A salvo of 18 surface-to-air missiles streaked upward, corkscrewing through the haze. In less than 90 seconds, 12 American drones were torn apart, exploding into harmless fireballs. One drone spun out of control, veering dangerously close to the Raptors before being vaporized by a quick burst from an escorting Eagle. For a heartbeat, chaos reigned. The Hunter drones nearly colliding with their own guardians. But the swarm pressed on. The surviving 56 drones split into 3 attack groups, diving toward radar arrays and missile launchers. At 3:43 p.m., the first impact landed. A drone slammed directly into an S-400 battery, detonating with a roar that sent a mushroom of fire rising 200 feet into the air. Secondary explosions followed as fuel trucks and ammunition caches went up in flames. Seizing the opening, the F-22s dropped into attack runs. In pairs, they unleashed precision-guided jams, each 2,000 pounds bomb screaming down at Mach 1. The results were catastrophic. One Russian radar dome costing over $300 million vanished in a single strike. Another command bunker reinforced with concrete was cracked open like an eggshell. Still, the defenders fought back. Panzer batteries fired volley after volley of Audat cannon shells, tracers ripping across the clouds. A burst struck the wing of one UAV cluster, sending 5 drones spiraling into the sea. An F-15X swooping low returned fire with a GBU-39 small-diameter bomb, silencing the gun crews in a single flash. By 3:50 p.m., the battle was a storm of fire and steel. The Americans had lost 17 drones, but obliterated at least 7 major air defense positions, leaving gaping holes in Kaliningrad's shield. The Raptors and Eagles circled back, their radios alive with clipped calm voices, ready for the second phase of the strike. The world had just witnessed something unthinkable. The supposedly impenetrable fortress of Kaliningrad, Russia's pride, was bleeding under the sky. And the storm had only begun. Stay with me. Next is the decisive attack that will completely wipe out this base. 3:51 p.m., Baltic skies. The American assault had torn gaping holes into Kaliningrad's air defenses, but Moscow's fortress was not yet silent. Deep in hardened bunkers, Russian commanders screamed new orders. Surviving S-300V4 and Panzer S-1 systems locked onto the American strike force, their launch tubes rising like steel fangs. In less than a minute, 22 surface-to-air missiles were fired in rapid succession. White contrails laced the sky, each warhead moving at blistering speeds, some exceeding Mach 10. The swarm of drones scattered. But the Raptors and Eagles had no such luxury. At 3:53 p.m., a thunderous explosion split the sky. An F-15EX Eagle II, valued at over $87 million, took a direct hit from an S-300 missile. The aircraft disintegrated mid-air, raining flaming debris across the Baltic waves.